Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking on a genuinely fascinating challenge, demystifying the 3-sample Diploma Programme, or DP, unit planners. Now, if you're an educator, you know all too well that curriculum planning isn't just about filling out paperwork, right? It's about mapping out the entire intellectual journey for your students. But when you put these 3 distinct templates side by side, it's pretty easy to look at them and think, what exactly are we building here? So let's unpack the hidden architecture of these documents together and really dig into the educational traditions and philosophies that are driving them.
All right, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start by looking at their shared DNA, then we'll compare Planner 1, Planner 2, and Planner 3, and finally, we'll unpack this major philosophical curriculum tension they all face. Let's dive in.
Section 1. The Planner's Shared DNA.
Now, it's absolutely crucial to realize that these 3 templates aren't just completely different, random ideas plucked out of thin air. They're actually an evolution of a shared lineage. You can almost think of them like houses built in the exact same neighborhood. Planner 1, that's your streamlined starter home. It's lean, it's pragmatic. Planner 2 adds a conceptual second story, drawing really heavily on MYP traditions. And Planner 3 is basically the fully integrated, heavily engineered mansion. But despite their overall character, look at the dominant planning tradition here. They are all rooted in backward design and outcomes-based logic. So, essentially, they all share this foundational DNA. They are all attempting what is honestly a brutally difficult balancing act, trying to marry rigid, predetermined educational outcomes with the fluid, open-ended nature of constructivist, inquiry-based IB pedagogy. Keep that tension in the back of your mind, because it's going to haunt literally every single planner we look at today.
Moving right along to Section 2, Planner 1, Lean and Pragmatic.
Okay, so this planner serves as our baseline. It's the simplest iteration of the 3, but don't let that fool you into thinking it lacks structure. Planner 1 actually relies on a modernized version of Ralph W. Tyler's logic from way back in 1949. Basically, it asks, what's our purpose? How do we organize experiences to meet it, and how do we evaluate it? But it takes that and layers it with Wiggins and McTighe's famous backward design. It starts right at the top with transfer goals, meaning it demands you figure out exactly what knowledge and skills you want students to apply independently long before you even think about what you're doing on a Tuesday morning.
But check out this punchy critique from our source analysis. Planner 1 has this really bold heading that says, Teaching and Learning Through Inquiry. But we got to ask ourselves, does simply having a heading for inquiry actually make deep student questioning happen? In this planner, there's no dedicated space for conceptual generalizations or anticipating where students might get confused. Inquiry is claimed, for sure, but the actual architecture of the document doesn't force it to happen.
So what are the trade-offs here? Well, its biggest strength is simply its economy. It gives a solid spine to your planning without totally suffocating experienced teachers. And it definitely stops a unit from degrading into just a random list of activities. But on the flip side, the weakness is a pretty loose relationship between the goals and the assessments. You aren't strictly forced to prove that every single goal is actually being measured. And those crucial IB elements, like approaches to learning or TOK, without a deeper structural integration, they risk becoming mere boxes you tick right before the bell rings.
Let's look at Section 3, Planner 2, the Conceptual Bridge.
Stepping up the complexity a bit, Planner 2 is heavily influenced by Lynn Erickson's concept-based curriculum. This is a real game changer because it shifts the entire conversation. Instead of just asking, what should students learn, it asks, what should they understand conceptually? It separates content, skills, and concepts, and challenges teachers to transform those into specific inquiry questions. Because of this, it acts as an incredibly strong bridge for teachers and students who are transitioning from the MYP right into the DP. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the hidden trap. As our analysis points out, fake inquiry is a massive danger here. Think about it. If your essential understanding is just a plain fact, slapping a question mark onto the end of it doesn't magically create genuine inquiry. Asking students, what is photosynthesis, might look like a concept-based inquiry question on your planner, but let's be real, it's still just a factual recall prompt in disguise.
Looking at the balance sheet for Planner 2, its main strength is absolutely that MYP-to-DP continuity. It drags concepts off the sidelines and puts them front and center in a visible planning role. But its critical flaw? It tends to treat content, skills, and concepts as 3 parallel, isolated boxes. In genuine concept-based design, these aren't separate things. The concepts are the abstractions that organize the facts. Plus, much like Planner 1, it still doesn't force a super strict alignment between those beautiful conceptual understandings and your actual assessments.
All right, Section 4, Planner 3, the aligned heavyweight.
This is where things get incredibly ambitious. Planner 3 takes multiple heavy-hitting educational theories and synthesizes them into one massive framework. At its core is John Biggs' theory of constructive alignment. This strictly requires a one-to-one match between your learning goals and your assessments, no exceptions. On top of that, it integrates Flavel's research on metacognition, requiring actual dedicated space for students to reflect on their own skill development. It's a beast of a planner.
Let's see how this builds an incredibly defensible chain. You start with transfer goals, move to your understandings, but then, and this is completely unique to this planner, you must anticipate student misconceptions before you even write your inquiry questions. Then, every single goal has to have a one-to-one matching assessment piece. Finally, you close it out with explicit metacognitive reflection. It is a highly coherent logical sequence.
But, we really have to address the 8-page elephant in the room here. Have you ever felt like you were just serving the paperwork rather than the paperwork serving you? When a planning form becomes this elaborate, it is incredibly tempting to just teach the unit however you normally would and then exhaustively reverse engineer plausible answers into the planner on a Sunday night just to get it done.
To summarize Planner 3, its strengths are genuinely unmatched. That one-to-one assessment rule completely eliminates curricular misalignment. You literally cannot claim you're teaching one thing while testing another, and proactively anticipating those misconceptions is just fantastic pedagogy. But the weakness is the sheer exhaustion it can cause the teacher. Furthermore, by prescripting goals, questions, and misunderstandings to this degree, you risk totally over-engineering the unit, and that can unintentionally crush the beautiful, unexpected questions that students naturally bring to the table.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 5, the Great Curriculum Tension.
So this is where we really see the different planning traditions collide. There is a massive philosophical clash underlying all three of these planners. They are effectively battlegrounds trying to force two competing traditions to coexist on a single piece of paper. On one hand, you have the rational and technical tradition. It's about defining outcomes, selecting methods, assessing goals. It's very clean, very measurable. But on the other hand, you have the constructivist inquiry tradition, the one the IB champions. Here, learning is organic, it's messy, it's driven by dialogue, and it's completely open to unexpected directions. Formal planning demands the first tradition, while the actual spirit of the classroom demands the second.
Ultimately, our source analysis recommends Planner 3 as the most philosophically aligned and rigorous design. It operationalizes inquiry, alignment, and reflection better than the rest. However, to truly serve both of those traditions we just talked about, it needs a slight tweak. It absolutely must explicitly create space for emergent student questions. The unexpected detours and brilliant insights that happen mid-unit, which you simply cannot plan backwards for. Which brings us to the ultimate paradox, and the thought I want to leave you with today. As you look at your own unit plans, regardless of which template you happen to use, ask yourself this: how do you plan inquiry without predetermining it? How do you build a structure strong enough to guarantee learning, but flexible enough to let the students actually lead the way? It's arguably the greatest challenge in education, and honestly, mastering it is what makes a truly exceptional teacher. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.